Greetings, dear friends. Today I have prepared for you a story full of secrets, dramatic twists and real emotions. Before I start, I want to remind you that if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it right now so that you don't miss the amazing new stories that await you ahead. Here we are talking about destinies in which pain and joy, despair and hope, weakness and incredible strength of spirit are intertwined. And now I want to invite you to travel with me to the time of the Wild West. It was a harsh world where every day could be the last. A world in which the loud clatter of hooves mixed with the crackle of a campfire and the clink of revolvers. Here, destinies were decided not in quiet classrooms, but under the scorching sun of the prairies and among the merciless winds of the deserts. But this story is not about gold or gunfights, although they are always there in those days. Today we will see the fate of a girl whose life was marked by an unusual appearance and a difficult choice. She was born special, and it was this feature that caused her father to force her to marry against her will. But it is this forced union that will lead to the fact that one day she will be called differently than anyone has called her before. She will be called the White Moon, a symbol of light in the thickest darkness. So, get comfortable, because right now a story begins that will take you into the depths of human feelings and passions. The sun's rays barely touched the dusty street of a small town on the border of the Wild West, when a young albino stood at the edge of the gate. Her skin was almost transparent, and her hair, long and snow-white, fluttered in the wind, as if the desert itself was playing with them. Her white eyebrows and eyelashes created an effect of fragility, as if every detail of her face was carved from porcelain. But in the depths of the gray eyes there was an extraordinary determination, fear and quiet bitterness. Every glance from passers-by felt like a cold blow, whispers behind his back, sidelong glances, distrust, and sometimes open hostility. She felt like a stranger in this world, which didn't seem to want to see her as a human being. The father, a strict and stern ranchero, stood outside the door of the house, clasping his hands, scarred by work and debts. He saw in his daughter not so much a personality as a source of possible salvation for the family, a chance to gain a ransom or strengthen the union through marriage, a way to save the ranch from imminent bankruptcy. But the girl felt it like a yoke around her neck, as if fate had decided that she was just an object that had no right to her own desires. Somewhere beyond the horizon, in the dry desert, the Apache tribes were hiding. Their proximity gave the people of the city a constant sense of anxiety. Every figure that appeared on the hill made the locals shiver, and the girl had a strange curiosity and unusual warmth. She knew that these people lived in a completely different way, freely, in harmony with the earth and the wind, and in this contrast her own life seemed even more narrow and limited. Inside, she was trying to come to terms with what lay ahead. But the thought that her path might be predetermined by other people's decisions caused a quiet rebellion. Every movement, every breath is like a small struggle for freedom, for the right to be yourself. She understood that while her father was deciding fate through deals and threats, her own voice remained locked up, barely audible in a whisper that she dared not share with anyone. The dusty roads, the scorching sun and the remote mountains around the city created an atmosphere of inevitability. Here, every action had a price, every step could change her life, and the girl felt that this world was ready to present her with a test for which she was not yet ready. But there was a quiet fire smoldering in her heart, the desire to prove that she was not just a white moon for strangers, but a living person with her own thoughts, fears and dreams. My father stood in the shadow of the veranda, his shoulders tense, and his gaze glided along the deserted street as if seeking approval from the world itself. His voice in the girl's head sounded like a harsh sentence, although the words were not spoken out loud. The farm must be saved at all costs, and she is the means to do this. The thought of an alliance with an Apache chieftain or warrior seemed not just an alien prospect to her, but a shackle around her neck. She imagined herself as an object of commerce, laid out in plain sight, and a feeling of helplessness pierced her heart with a cold needle. Every thought of a future where her desires were ignored led to a storm of emotions inside. Tears welled up by themselves as soon as she closed her eyes, and her cheeks burned with burning heat when she tried to hide them from strangers. She felt humiliated not only in front of her father, but also in front of the world itself, which seemed to condemn her for being born different. Neighbors and relatives whispered, stealing glances at her porcelain skin and snow-white hair. Their whispers were like an echo of an old legend, as if the heavens had imposed punishment for her unusual appearance. Every breath and step the girl took seemed like a challenge to them, and she felt as if her own family was forgetting that she was a living person with her fears and hopes. A storm was raging inside her, shame and resentment intertwined with a quiet rage that grew with every passing moment. Her mind was looking for a way to escape, to prove to herself and others that her life belongs only to her. But my father was adamant. His hardness seemed like a wall, insurmountable and cold, and every glance in his direction made it clear that there would be no compromise. Everything around her began to feel like a crushing spider web. The dusty veranda, the dim light of the sunset, the whispers of the neighbors, all this squeezed her chest, as if trying to push her own identity out of her. She felt like a prisoner, trapped in a body that in itself caused fear and envy. But even in this enclosed space, a quiet fire of defiance smoldered in her soul, a desire that whispered that one day her life would belong only to her. Every breath felt like resistance. Every movement, every blink of her snow-white eyelashes is a tiny act of protest against her fate being decided by someone else's hands. And in this quiet rebellion, she found strength, not yet realized, but already ready to flare up like a fire in a dry desert. The dust rising from the road seemed almost alive when a figure appeared on the horizon. He walked straight, confidently, carrying with him a power that could be felt even before he got close. The girl, watching his every move, felt a strange combination of anxiety and curiosity. His skin was tanned, his hair was black and long, braided into thin braids, and his eyes, dark but attentive, met her gray eyes without judgment, as if they saw something more than appearance. Conflicting emotions seethed inside her. Fear, that a stranger would determine her fate, curiosity, that this gaze was not hostile, a growing hope, that behind the stern appearance there was a person who could understand her. Every movement of the groom seemed well thought out, every word spoken in the Apache language vibrated in the air, creating a sense of ritual, ancient and important. The wedding ceremony, according to the traditions of the tribe, was majestic and strangely beautiful. The flames of the campfire reflected in their eyes, and the girl's heart contracted and expanded at the same time. She felt like she was part of something more than just family deals. Every ceremony was steeped in respect, power, and the history of a people who honored the earth, air, and sun. And at the moment when the smoke of the campfire rose to the sunset sky, for the first time he uttered the words that pierced her soul. Mi luna blanca, my white moon. This nickname did not sound like a claim, it sounded like a recognition, as a bright sign that her beauty and uniqueness would not become a curse, but would become a gift that someone sees and appreciates. A strange feeling arose inside her, a mixture of surprise and growing trust. She understood that despite the fact that life had forced her to be a prisoner of circumstances, here, among the flames and songs of the tribe, there was someone who looked at her differently. Not with contempt and fear, but with respect and interest. The girl felt that this moment was the first crucial step. Her heart was beating faster, and every cell in her body tensed at the realization that her life was about to change. But not in the sense that her father decided for her, but in the fact that for the first time someone sees her not as a deal, but as a living, unique person. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to inhale the smell of smoke, earth, and dusty wind. The inner fire, which had previously been only a quiet whisper, now burst into a bright light. Mi luna blanca, these words sounded like a promise, like a quiet hope that her world could be different. The girl stood at the edge of the tribe's camp, feeling like a stranger in an environment that was so different from the usual dusty streets of the town. Every glance from the Apaches was cautious, wary, as if they were assessing her like a fragile bird that had suddenly appeared in their world. She felt a chill of fear mixed with an unusual admiration. Here, among people living in harmony with nature, her unusual beauty did not cause whispers and sidelong glances, but it still made her heart beat faster. Resistance was growing inside her. Every gesture of the groom, every attempt to help, seemed to violate her personal space. She rejected his care, afraid of falling into the trap of new obligations, afraid that her freedom would become even more conditional. My thoughts were racing like dust in a windy desert. Can I trust him? Or is it just another chain hidden behind respect? But gradually she noticed what had previously been hidden behind the mask of severity. He protected her from the ridicule and mocking glances of the tribe, gently guided her, explaining rituals and traditions that were alien and difficult for her. Every day brought small lessons: how to hold an arrow correctly, how to read signs on the ground, how to move quietly and gracefully in harmony with the surrounding nature. His patience and attention created a sense of security that she didn't allow herself to acknowledge. At first, these moments seemed to her only a necessary formality, but every day the inner barrier erected by fear and distrust began to crack. She began to notice that her husband was watching her movements, as if he was afraid that she would get lost or hurt, that he appreciated her efforts, despite the clumsiness of the first steps, that something more than formal respect appeared in his gaze, understanding, which slowly, almost imperceptibly, turned into trust. Her heart reacted unpredictably. The inner fire that had been burning quietly and timidly before was now flashing brighter. She understood that the world, which seemed strange and frightening to her, could become a place where her strangeness would not be a curse, but would become part of something alive, complex and real. Every day she learned to let go of fear, to allow herself to see it not as a threat, but as an ally. The first sparks of trust that arose between them were gentle and careful, like thin rays of light breaking through thick clouds. But it was these rays that began to illuminate her inner world, promising that even in the harsh and difficult Wild West there was a place for warmth and understanding. The dusty winds of the Wild West once again brought disturbing news. Rumors of white settlers moving towards the Apache lands did not abate. The girl stood on the outskirts of the camp, feeling her heart constrict from the growing tension. Every shadow, every noise seemed to be a harbinger of danger. Lands that had seemed strange and wild to her before now felt like home, and that home was under threat. She looked at her husband, a stern and attentive young warrior whose facial features reflected inner resilience and willingness to protect the tribe. But his gaze was directed not only at the earth, but also at it, as if he saw in its presence not a threat, but a symbol of the union of two worlds, two cultures that had to coexist in a delicate balance. Conflicting emotions seethed inside the girl. She felt fear and a desire to run away to the familiar dusty street of the town, to a house where at least the order was predictable. But thoughts of running away collided with something stronger, with the tender bond that had arisen between her and her husband, with a sense of responsibility to the new world that was just beginning to open up for her. Can I keep it? Can I leave this nation that accepted me despite all the differences? Her mind repeated these questions like a spell. The tension was growing by the minute. The distant horsemen on the horizon seemed like shadows, harbingers of trouble. She felt fear mixed with determination. The decision to stay here meant taking a risk, and leaving meant losing something that had already become a part of her heart. She understood that her choice would become a symbol that she was ready either to accept a fate imposed from the outside, or to fight for freedom and trust that had arisen between the two worlds. The wind carried the smell of campfires, smoke, and dry earth. In these scents, she felt the life of the tribe, its strength and defiance, felt her own fragility and at the same time inner resilience. The internal dialogue turned into a quiet struggle. The fear of an external threat collided with the desire to preserve something real that had arisen between her and the man who called her Mi Luna Blanca. It was at this moment that she realized for the first time that being a fragile white moon means not only shining among alien lands, but also being able to withstand the storm that is approaching, standing next to someone who has become her ally, her guide in a world full of dangers, trials and unexpected discoveries. The wind picked up the dust again, mixing it with screams and the sounds of distant panic. The Apache camp was attacked suddenly. The horsemen of the white settlers came like a storm, smashing tents and sweeping away everything in their path. The girl was standing next to her husband, her heart was pounding, adrenaline was squeezing her chest, and fear was mixed with unexpected determination. She saw the faces of people, friends, tribal elders, children, and realized that delay or flight could cost them their lives. Every step was a test. Dust ate into her eyes, blows flew around, and in this chaotic symphony of violence she had to make instant decisions. Inside, she felt a fear that cut like a knife, but at the same time, a strange warmth of power. The thought that she was no longer just Mi Luna Blanca to her husband, but a living participant in events that required courage, kept her moving. She rushed to the child, who was stuck under the collapsed tent, pushing him out from under the rubble, hugging him to protect him from flying arrows and the rumble of horse hooves. Her husband, a strong and fearless warrior, fought alongside, but a sudden wound on his shoulder made him weak. The girl felt a chill of horror in her chest. The thought of losing him was unbearable. She stood next to him, covering him with her body, fending off blows and directing her gaze at everyone who tried to approach. Emotions were bubbling inside her: fear, love, determination, and the unshakable belief that her actions could change the outcome of this chaos. Every moment was a test: dust, blood, screams, the clatter of weapons. She realized that she could no longer be passive. Her fragile appearance now hid an incredible inner strength. Every move, every decision was soaked with adrenaline and the thought of protecting the one she loves and the people who accepted her as their own. When the attack reached its climax, she saw in front of her not only enemies, but also a choice that determined her fate: to be a defender, to be part of a new world united by love and trust, or to stay away, allowing fear to rule her life. The wind carried screams and the smell of smoke, and the girl stood in the midst of chaos, feeling a fire burning in her chest, a fire that made her strong, brave and ready for any challenge. The sunlight from the campfire softly illuminated the tent, creating dancing shadows on the dusty walls. The albino girl sat next to her Apache husband, feeling every movement of the wind, every crackle of fire, as if nature itself was pausing after the chaos of the day. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from the internal tension left over from yesterday's violent scene. Images of chaos still swirled in her thoughts, but next to him she felt a strange calmness, a mixture of trust, gratitude and quiet joy. She noticed every detail of his face, his serious eyes, which usually hid a storm of thoughts, now reflected concern and respect for her. His attention to small things, to her mood, to her weaknesses, all this slowly dissolved the fear and doubts left after the imposed marriage and the first days of life in the tribe. A new feeling grew inside her, the understanding that this man sees her not as someone else's object, not as a white moon for other people's purposes, but as a living soul capable of shining even in the most difficult circumstances. She felt that she had come to love him, not immediately and not without fear, but gradually, through observation, through trust, through small gestures of care that were more precious than any words. The fire was reflected in her gray eyes, as if she herself was becoming a part of that light. Her thoughts were intertwined with the image of the future, unpredictable, harsh, where every day is a struggle, but now there was a person with whom she could move forward. Her inner monologue replaced anxiety with quiet confidence. Let the world be cruel, let no one guarantee happiness, but next to him she could be herself, could breathe freely and feel love. The dust, the smell of the campfire and the quiet noise outside the tent created an atmosphere of intimacy unusual for the harsh Wild West. She allowed herself to feel peace for the first time in a long time, watching him carefully take care of her. Their connection no longer depended on words, it was in every look, every gesture, in a silence full of trust and a new feeling that was just beginning to unfold. The light of the evening sun scorched the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and copper ochre. An albino girl and her Apache husband were sitting on a hillock, watching the valley where their settlement combined traces of two worlds. Her hair, snow-white and shimmering in the last light of day, seemed to glow, and her white eyelashes and eyebrows gave her face an almost ephemeral charm. He was sitting next to her, strong and focused, his shoulder lightly touching hers, and that touch meant more than 1,000 words. The wind brought a light scent of dust, grass and campfire smoke, reminding of a previous day full of worries and trials. She felt like she was part of something bigger, but at the same time she realized that their journey was just beginning. Every glance on the horizon is a mixture of anxiety and hope, every sigh is a reminder that the world around us is full of unpredictable threats. A quiet fire of courage smoldered inside her. She was no longer the scared girl who was once considered the white moon only for her unusual appearance. Now she knew that she could hold her place in this cruel and beautiful world, together with the man who saw light and strength in her. Watching her eyes, he felt her inner transformation, the same power that had once attracted his attention. And although the danger still remained nearby, rumors of uninvited guests, the unpredictability of the Wild West land, they sat together, shoulder to shoulder, ready to face any challenges. The dusty road below seemed open, winding through the desert, and there was confidence in their hearts. Although their story was not yet complete, they could go on together. Every step forward is a step towards the unknown, but not alone, but together. And as the sun slowly sank behind the mountains, she felt that the light of their shared life was just beginning to break through the shadows. Thank you for watching this story to the end. Your attention is incredibly important to me. Every minute spent with this story is like a step along the dusty road of the Wild West with the characters. I have a warm feeling of gratitude and a slight pride inside me. After all, we lived through the emotions, worries and joys that our white moon and her Apache husband experienced together. If you enjoyed this trip, please like the channel. It helps us create even more stories full of drama, romance and adventure. Feel free to leave comments, share your thoughts about the fates of the characters, how you imagined their lives in the harsh world of the Wild West, and what moments especially touched you. Subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss the stories and experience joy, anxiety and excitement with us again. See you soon. May your hearts remain open to light and dark, to adventure and emotion, just as our heroes hold on to each other on the open road of life.